Hey guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to another video. So yeah, in this video I'm just going to go through all of the movies, all of the Blu-rays and the 4Ks that I have purchased in the month of July 2024. So yeah, let's get into it. So the first one we have here is Bordello of Blood, otherwise known as Tales from the Crypt presents Bordello of Blood. Yeah, I picked up Demon Knight last month, the first Tales from the Crypt movie. Really enjoyed it, so I've been on the lookout for this one. And yeah, it was okay. I didn't like it as much as Demon Knight. It's basically about this guy, played by Corey Feldman, who goes missing and his sister hires a private investigator to find him. The last place he was seen was this bordello, and yeah, it's basically just run by vampires, and that's basically it. I thought the movie was okay. It was a little bit average in places. Like I said, I didn't like it as much as Demon Knight. It has some good gore in places, but yeah, the story just feels a bit tired. The cast isn't the greatest. But yeah, it was okay. But yeah, I definitely preferred Demon Knight. But still got happy to have it in the collection. So yeah, that is Bordello of Blood. Next up, we have a film that I'd never even really heard of, and I think I only discovered it because I was looking at another film, but the premise of this one and the cast and the director kind of interested me, and it's a movie called Dangerously Close. So this is a film that came out in 1986, I think, and it's kind of like a high school vigilante movie in a similar vein to Class of 1984 and The New Kids. It involves this group of kids who are like the popular students, and they go out at night and basically intimidate other high school students who are a little bit different. They just try and put fear into them. They don't intend to hurt the kids, it's just, they just want to intimidate them for fun. But when one of the kids they intimidate ends up being murdered, they kind of need to look at what they're doing and kind of try and investigate what's happened. It's a really interesting film. It kind of deals with all the sort of the social issues you have at schools, you know, kids who are different. You know, you have the jocks and you have the geeks and you have sort of like goths and punks and people like that. So it's quite an interesting film. It's not as gratuitously violent as the likes of Class of 1984 or The New Kids, but it's an interesting film. And it's got a pretty good cast, like not like any sort of famous actors in here, but some very familiar faces. You've got John Stockwell here, who is probably best known for being Arnie's best friend Dennis in Christine. You've got Carrie Lowell, who played Pam, the Bond girl in License to Kill, the best Bond movie, I'll say. And you've also got Tom Matthews, who is probably best known for being in Return of the Living Dead, and what was the other film? Friday the 13th Part 6, that's the one. So yeah, it's a pretty fun movie, fun little 80s action thriller, and an interesting watch. So yeah, that is Dangerously Close. Next up we have Ms. 45. This is a Spanish import, and yeah, this is a movie from the early 80s, directed by Abel Ferreira. It's kind of like a Death Wish inspired revenge movie. It's about this woman who is, she's mute, she works at like this art company. And at the beginning of the film, while she's walking home from work, she gets sexually assaulted not once, but twice by two different men. And obviously, you know, it completely destroys her, you know, mentally, physically. And she kind of goes on a bit of a killing spree after that. But it's an interesting film because it's probably more of a psychological thriller than, you know, an action revenge thriller like Death Wish. But it's a lot psychologically deeper than I expected it to be, and that kind of surprised me about the movie. You know, it kind of deals with, you know, how revenge isn't really the best course of action, and you know, those kind of actions can just make things worse instead of better. And yeah, I really liked that aspect of the film, and it reaches a pretty good climax, and it really captures that sort of early 80s seedy, sleazy New York vibe really well. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. That is Ms. 45. Next up, I have a collection of 4 movies here. This is from 101 Films, from their summer sale that they're currently having at the moment. Now, I was only really interested in seeing the first film in this collection, but it was only a couple of quid more to just get the collection of the 4 movies, so I thought, yeah, why not? And it is the Nemesis Collection. So this is Nemesis 1 to 4. And these movies are sort of like dystopian, futuristic, sci-fi action films. The first film in particular is about this guy who's sort of hired by the government to track down his former partner who has got sort of vital information that is sort of like poses national security risk. The movie is very much like Blade Runner, but with a bit more action, and it has some Terminator influence in there as well. But the first film in particular, the first Nemesis film, is really good. It's a fantastic action film. The opening sequence in particular blew me away. If you like sort of early, well, sort of 80s and early 90s action films, like B-movie action films, canon films, I would definitely recommend the first Nemesis movie. The rest of them are not quite as good. I think they were all straight to video. The second one's watchable, it's okay, but the third and fourth one I wouldn't bother with. But I would definitely recommend the first Nemesis film for all you action junkies out there, because, yeah, it's a lot of fun. So yeah, that is the Nemesis Collection. Next up, we have another Spanish import here, and this is Rapid Fire, starring Brandon Lee. Yeah, so this is the last film Brendan Lee made before he went on to do The Crow, which would ultimately be his last film, sadly. But yeah, this is a movie I've been meaning to upgrade on Blu-ray for a long time. This is actually my favourite Brandon Lee film. I do love The Crow, but this one I like just because I think it showcases him properly as an action star. This movie is so action-packed and so fun, and once the action starts, it just never takes its foot off the gas, and it is just so much fun from start to finish. The story's a bit basic, you know, it's nothing special, but it's just great for the action. And like I said, you know, Brendan Lee just shows off what he's capable of in this movie, fight scenes, even the acting, there's a bit of romance in there as well. He pretty much does a lot in this movie, and yeah, that's why it's my favourite film that Brandon Lee did. So yeah, that is Rapid Fire. Next up, we have Shin Godzilla. So yeah, earlier this year I watched Godzilla -1, which is the latest Japanese Godzilla film, and I absolutely loved it. I thought it was fantastic, and it got me thinking about this movie because I know this came out a few years prior, and it's like another sort of modern retelling of Godzilla. I knew this film had a bit of a mixed reception, and yeah, I can very much understand that. I thought this movie was okay, but I was a little bit disappointed with it. It's very much a Godzilla movie from the perspective of the politicians and the researchers and the scientists, and large majority of this movie takes place in like offices with people having meetings on how they're trying to deal with Godzilla as he's out there causing all this destruction. So there's very little Godzilla action in this film. It is still there and it's still good when it happens, but yeah, the movie's just a bit on the slow side, and you know, it's not really what I wanted from a Godzilla film. But I know some people really like the sort of the direction that this film takes, because it is different. But yeah, for me, it was a little bit disappointing, especially coming off Godzilla -1. But it was an interesting watch. So that is Shin Godzilla. Next up, we have another film that I picked up in the 101 summer sale, and it is 2-Minute Warning. So this is a 1970s action thriller starring Charlton Heston, and it's about this sniper who perches himself at the top of this football stadium, and he's there whilst a football game is going on, and you know, there's a particular target that's at the football game that he wants to pick off. The police discover the sniper pretty early in the film, but they want to try and stop him without causing a panic, and it proves more difficult than they could have imagined. It's a really enjoyable 70s thriller. It's got that 1970s disaster movie kind of vibe to it. There's lots of different characters in this movie, lots of different subplots going on, and yeah, it reaches a really thrilling conclusion, and great performance from Charlton Heston in there. So yeah, if you like your sort of action thrillers, something along the lines of maybe Dirty Harry, you know, even that has a sniper in it. This is a similar kind of film. So yeah, that is 2-Minute Warning. Next up, I have a media book from Germany, and the reason why I picked this up is because I think this is the only way you can get this film on Blu-ray, and it's an interesting release. So it's advertised as Cover Hard 2, starring Chow Yun-Fat, but it's not called Cover Hard 2. The actual movie is City on Fire. And it's a movie from 1987 that is basically about this gang that robs jewellery stores. Chow Yun-fat plays a police officer who has to go undercover and infiltrate the gang and obviously bring them to justice as he can. I think the movie is supposedly the inspiration for Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs. But yeah, it's a fantastic film. Great story, really tense in places, good acting from Chow Yun-fat and Danny Lee, and it's got some good action scenes in there. This actual media book is just so bizarre though, because, you know, it's called Cover Hard 2, and I think the reason why it's called Cover Hard 2 is because there are two other media books that you can get. Cover Hard 1, which I think is the movie Full Contact, and Cover Hard 3, which I think is the movie The Adventurers. The movies have nothing in common with each other. I think the only thing connecting them is they're all directed by Ringo Lam. But yeah, I think basically these media books form part of a three-part collection. But yeah, it's just so bizarre with the title. And also this picture, it's not from City on Fire, it's from Hard Boiled, a great action film, also starring Chow Yun-fat. But, you know, it's a nice little media book, you know, it's all in German, all the stuff that you get in here, so I'd have to get Google Translate to obviously read it, but yeah, I just really wanted to see the film, and this was the only way to do it. So yeah, that is City on Fire on Blu-ray. Right, so on to the 4Ks now, and the first one we have here is a fairly recent release. I think it came out last week, actually. And that is Election, starring Matthew Broderick and Reese Witherspoon. Yeah, this is a movie that I've been wanting to upgrade for a long time, and then once it got a 4K release announced, I knew I was going to get it. I love this film. It's one of my favourites from the 90s. Great black comedy set at this high school. It's not your typical high school comedy movie. Matthew Broderick plays this teacher who works there. Reese Witherspoon plays the student who is a bit of a teacher's pet. You know, she's a real go-getter, and she's taking part in the high school class elections that they have in America. I don't really understand what they are, but she's like the leading candidate. And Matthew Broderick's character, he just takes a disliking to her. He just doesn't like her. He just thinks she's really annoying. You know, she's overly ambitious and too much of a teacher's pet. So he decides to recruit another student played by Chris Klein, who is probably best known for being in the American Pie films. He's not the brightest, he's a little bit dim, but he's a popular student, he's an athlete, and yeah, Matthew Broderick just decides to recruit him to go up against her, mainly just because he just doesn't like her and he wants to see her fail. It's such a funny movie. It takes quite a dark turn in places, but yeah, just a fantastic film, and yeah, glad to have it on 4K. So that is Election. Next up, we have a film on 4K that I know a lot of people don't like this movie, but I don't know what to tell you. I love this film. It's maybe because of nostalgia, but it is Godzilla from 1998, also starring Matthew Broderick. And yeah, I really like this film. I can understand the hate for it. I know Godzilla doesn't really look like Godzilla, and he feels more like just a dinosaur. But I just think this is a fun action movie. It's directed by Roland Emmerich, who had just come off doing Independence Day. And I kind of lump this film in a very similar category to Independence Day. This came out at a time when we got a lot of disaster movies like Volcano, Dante's Peak, Twister, Daylight, Deep Impact. And I kind of feel this is very similar. It feels like a disaster movie. I like how it shows all the sort of the aftermath of Godzilla's destruction, the military's intervention, and all that kind of stuff. And I just think it's a really fun movie. It's a great looking movie, great action scenes, great special effects. And yeah, I just think it seems to get a lot of very unfair criticism. But yeah, I really enjoy it. I saw it in the cinema when I was about 8 years old, and I loved it, so that's probably another reason why I have a lot of nostalgia for it. But yeah, glad to have it on 4K. Looks really good. It's a Sony release, so you're always going to get good quality releases with them. But yeah, that is Godzilla on 4K. Next up, we have Jaws 2 on 4K. So yeah, the other week I rewatched the first Jaws film on 4K, and it made me want to rewatch the second one, and I just thought, you know what, I'll just get the 4K, I'll upgrade it from the Blu-ray. And yeah, I've always had a bit of a soft spot for this film. I think in terms of making a sequel to the original Jaws, a movie that never needed a sequel, I think this is the best we were ever going to get. And I think it's just a real solid shark movie. And even as a kid, I can remember I always tended to gravitate to this film more. And I think the reason was because I think this one has a little bit more shark action. The first movie is definitely the better movie, and it's more of a slow build, and you know, definitely a better movie for it. But as a kid, I used to love this one just because of all the shark action. It's a good movie. It's a solid sequel. Is it as good as the first one? Absolutely not. But like I said, they could have done a lot worse than this, and it's a real solid sequel. It's a worthy sequel for me. So yeah, that is Jaws 2 on 4K. Next up, we have another classic from my childhood here, another movie that I've been meaning to upgrade my old DVD of, and it is the original Jamanji starring Robin Williams. Yeah, I don't need to say too much about this film. I have so many great memories of watching it as a kid. I remember it scared the hell out of me as a kid, and yeah, it's just a fun movie. Robin Williams is great in it. Some of the special effects don't really hold up, especially when we see the monkeys, but overall I just think it's a really fun movie. And again, another Sony release. It looks really good on 4K, so if you're a fan of the movie and you haven't upgraded it to 4K, I would definitely do that. That is Jumanji on 4K. Next up, we have The Others on 4K, another film that I've been meaning to upgrade my old DVD from. Yeah, this is a fantastic horror film from the early 2000s. I think it was 2002. Stars Nicole Kidman. She lives in this big mansion in Jersey during World War II, and her and her kids find that they're being haunted by this presence that is in the mansion. Yeah, I think this is just a brilliant horror film. It's not like a conventional horror film with lots of scares and jump scares and all that kind of stuff, but it's just got such a great, like, chilling atmosphere to it. And for me, the twist at the end of this film is one of the best twists ever, and it's actually quite an underrated twist that kind of goes under the radar. Nicole Kidman is fantastic in the film. She was probably at the height of her powers when she made this. I can remember she was everywhere at the time this movie came out. But yeah, fantastic horror film. If you're a horror fan, it has to be watched. So yeah, that is The Others on 4K. Another favourite of mine from my childhood, and we have Wayne's World on 4K. Now, I kind of held off getting this for the longest time because for me, you can't have Wayne's World without Wayne's World 2, and I've been hoping that Paramount would release the second one and they'd do them in like a box set or something, but there just doesn't seem to be any sign of it, and I fancied giving this a rewatch, and I thought, you know what, I'll just get it on 4K. So I did, and yeah, I love this film. Mike Myers, Dana Carvey, just great in it. You know, they play these two guys that run their own cable TV show called Wayne's World. They love music, they love, you know, just getting up to mischief, and yeah, it's just such a fun movie. Great gags in there, and just lots of standout moments. And it looks fantastic in 4K. I was actually quite surprised at how good this one looked. Yeah, it looked really good. So if you're a fan of the movie, definitely get it on 4K. So yeah, that is Wayne's World. And then my last one for July is a movie that is probably my only boutique release that I picked up this month. It's a movie I have seen before, but it had been a long time since I'd seen it. But I picked it up mainly because I'm a huge fan of the director and I wanted to give this film a rewatch. And it is Bruiser, directed by George A. Romero. So this was his last sort of original film that he made, you know, non-Living Dead related film that came out in 2000, I think. And yeah, it had been a while since I'd seen this, and I'd kind of forgotten just how interesting this film was. It's basically about this guy who works for like this magazine company, and he wakes up one morning and he finds that his face has just completely turned white. It's kind of like a mask, but it's just on his face basically, and he takes this new persona and he goes on a bit of a killing spree against all people he feel has wronged him. He also goes up against the husband of this woman that he's in love with, because he's he's basically not a good guy. He treats her like crap, and you know, he feels like she deserves better. So it's kind of got a bit of a Phantom of the Opera kind of vibe to it, but I forgot just how strange and experimental this film was. If you're expecting like a conventional serial killer type of movie, you're probably not going to get it here. There's a lot of interesting things going on with this film. It's very artsy, very experimental, but it's an interesting film nonetheless. Very nice release from Indicator. You get your digipack with the disc in there, and you get a nice booklet. So it's a nice release. Yeah, it's not one of George A. Romero's best films for me, but it was interesting to rewatch, and yeah, it's worth watching if you fancy something a bit different from George A. Romero. So yeah, that is Bruiser on 4K. So there you go, guys. Those are all of my pickups for July 2024. Really hope you've enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments below if you've seen any of these movies. Have you picked up any of these particular releases? I would love to hear your thoughts. So until then, guys, I will see you all again on the next one. So take care.